Welcome back to another episode of ACC Central. We are continuing our Coaches Corners series with Georgia Tech hitting coach and recruiting coordinator James Ramsey, former ACC Player of the Year as well back in 2012. James, thanks for coming on and joining us.
Yeah, Monty, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate all you and the whole rest of the team do for our conference. I think it's awesome. Just the really personal feel, and I know our guys definitely appreciate it. I can say the same about players across the conference of just the feature pieces, and definitely appreciate all you guys have done.
Thanks. That means a lot. I mean, because it's so easy sometimes when we're doing this to forget that people actually see this stuff, which is nice to hear that it's appreciated. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about your coaching journey and how you ended up at Georgia Tech. Obviously, you've gotten to learn under two incredible Hall of Famers, but both you got to learn playing under Mike Martin and coaching under him initially, and now you're with Danny Hall, who's a Hall of Famer as well. Can you talk a little bit about that coaching journey and how you ended up at Georgia Tech?
Yeah, I think growing up in Atlanta and being around, obviously when I was a professional too, worked out at Georgia Tech and have known the Hall family, for a long time. Obviously, playing for Mike Martin was a dream come true. My dad played for him. There's not many times that you get to say, somebody coaches long enough at a successful enough rate that they can do it for that long. And the same can be said for Coach Hall, right? Like just the consistency of excellence. But the two of them, I think off the field were great friends, always have handled their family business the right way. Really great guys to work for. And, I think when you look at on field or off field or any like differences too, I think that it shows you just like anything else. When you look at the best college football coaches or basketball coaches, Roy Williams and Coach K or whatever, like they're not the same, but they have also both won. And the best thing is they've stayed true to themselves and the way that they have others kind of develop under them. No one's trying to make a carbon copy of them. And so I think that was the thing about 11 that was special, and the thing about Coach Hall as well. Like they're not trying to press who they are on their staff. There's definitely those program things that they think are important, but in terms of just working for them, I definitely feel very fortunate to have, we were joking, I forget what the number of wins are. It's like 3,500 wins between the two of them. It's a pretty good thing to be learning under the right people.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the story that I've been told is that you were a graduate assistant at Florida State after your playing career, and they didn't have a full-time position available, but they helped you get set up at Georgia Tech. Is that kind of how it went down for you to get a full-time coaching position? Or
yeah, so I was the volunteer assistant, so the third assistant now. Basically, Coach Martin had kind of kept pressing me to come coach with him, and to the point where he said, hey, this is it. This is my last year. And so still playing, and then seeing that happening, like, man, I don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Went down to be the third assistant there. And then within a couple months, got the call from Coach Hall about the opportunity to, I guess in theory, go from the third assistant to the second or first assistant role and, just go learn and be back home. My wife and I are both from Atlanta. Georgia Tech has a huge tradition of excellence as well. Got to run the offense, kind of run right away and jump in on the recruiting side. And so I think it was definitely a tough decision. I mean, that team went to Omaha, Florida State. The team at Tech was the third overall seed, hosted a regional. I think that both teams were hugely successful. But I think at the end of the day, it was like, man, to be able to go and get thrusted into this position, it was a huge opportunity. And I didn't take it lightly leaving. And I definitely, didn't take it lightly to be here at Tech and going on year 7 now. It's amazing how fast time flies, but super thankful for all the players, I've gotten to work with up to this point. We have an incredible staff, guys that, once again, you're doing life together. And that's the cool part. As hard as the days are working and you're away from your families or whatever it might be, but when you're with the right people, it really makes it easy to put in the grind of the effort. And that, like I said, goes on staff, support staff. And then obviously it's all about the players at the end of the day that you're working with.
You mentioned earlier that, you're from Atlanta. but your dad went to Florida State and played for Mike Martin. Was Georgia Tech on the radar recruiting you wise as a player, or was it always going to be Florida State?
Yeah, I think, naturally it was conversations were had, and, guys I played with ended up going to Georgia Tech. Vanderbilt, Coach Bakich was at Vanderbilt as the recruiting coordinator, when I was a high schooler. Vandy was another, you look down, and my older brother was just going to school at Vanderbilt. One of my best friends had committed there to pitch. And, you look at all these great schools, and, that's the cool part is the circle stays small in this world of whether it's a coach that recruited you or, it's cool to see Coach Forbes at UNC have all the success because he, had done such a great job as an assistant. Remember conversations, and, then you're as a player, you're interacting with other staffs. You always pull for the guys that do it the right way. And so I think that's been the cool part about now going from a player to a coach, and you maintain some of those relationships, and you compete against guys. And man, when you're in between the white lines, obviously we're all competitors, but when you get to see people keep their family first, work really hard, have success, go to Omaha, you definitely pull for those guys, just being in the industry.
And that's what I really appreciate about the college game versus the pros. You can really focus on the people and developing it. Because, these are young men that you guys are shaping, and it's a really formative time, and you can really help them become great people. And I think that's more the focus, because in the pros, it's the money involved and the job that, you've got to get them ready to be a professional athlete. But you guys can really focus on the people as individuals, and, that's why I love covering this, is getting to focus on the people, and it's so much fun to do. And, a thing that I love about the ACC as well is the importance of academics. And I know that was something that was important to you as a player, or you were just extremely smart and was able to get good grades without working hard, but I assume that's not the case. But I imagine with Georgia Tech's academic prowess, that's something you take on the recruiting trail as well for certain guys, if that's their thing. But I love that about the ACC, because a lot of guys choose to go to ACC schools because of the academics. Is that something that you like to stress on the recruiting, or is that just kind of tailored to the player that you're focused on?
Yeah, I think it's well said. I think it is individual. I think at the end of the day, even some of the best student athletes to come through here or anywhere, it's like Mark Teixeira always had the quote, it's almost like I majored in baseball and minored in school, and you joke, you're like, yeah, you're basically a 4.0 student. And he came back to get his degree a couple years ago after playing a bunch of years in the big league. So it did mean something. Matt Wieters got his degree recently from here. But for the high school kid, it's like, okay, 4 out of the 8 teams in the College World Series from the ACC. The winning tradition is happening. A place like Georgia Tech, bunch of first round picks, $300 million contracts, it's all there for you on the baseball side. But then also, okay, if you're looking at different schools and different things that line up, and you realize that 10 years, 20 years, 40 years down the road, the network of alumni, just the actual rigor that you go through, and the toughness, when you're riding a bus in the minor leagues, it's not easy every day. Even if you're a big prospect and all that, and if you learn to try to be excellent in every area of your life, whether that's academics, whether that's baseball, whether that's community service, whether that's your faith, whatever it is, me personally, I always felt like the total person of everything. If you could be consistently busy, I liked being busy in the right way, because it's you're giving back to the community, you're working hard in the weight room. I always felt like there wasn't really an off button. And so those are the high performers that you want to try to recruit. I know that I'm sure we'll talk about Drew Burris, but he's a good example of that dude has no off switch whatsoever. It's whether he's, playing baseball, whether he's in the classroom, whether he's hanging out with his buddies, or he's going duck hunting or whatever, he wants to be the best. And so, just that's the fun part. You like to recruit that's the fabric of the identity of your program. And I think, another staff that always had a lot of respect for is Virginia's staff of just consistency, whether that's the staff being together for a long time or that's the recruiting model. You see high school kids play that are committed to Virginia or something like that fits, right? Like that fits, and they do a really good job of identifying that. And then obviously there's like the character development. Once you get a kid into your program, then it's your job to say, okay, these were the guys that came before you, you're presently here. And then guys in the future, what are those things that we value, and why was that person so successful, and why is there a banner of them inside the stadium? It could be that they hit a bunch of home runs and made a bunch of money in the major leagues, but a lot of times there's something more they invested into others. And I think that's like the stewardship element of, tying a knot on the ACC and academic questions. Like the guys want more than sports. They want the major league success. They want the championships, all that stuff. But they also, a lot of times they decide that they want to run their own company one day, or they might meet somebody here that, develops a property that they end up buying. I think that's the beauty of a place like Georgia Tech for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the questions that always kind of puts a little fear into the players that I ask is what's your dream job outside of baseball? And that can always be a tough question, because for some of them, that's the ultimate goal and they haven't really thought about it. But, you always get some interesting answers. But somebody like Drew Burris is going to be in baseball given his family and everything. So that was a tough question for him. So we ended up just letting him say he could coach if his dream job there. Yeah. But being a former ACC Player of the Year, you had an incredible career at Georgia Tech. You excelled in this conference. Do you feel like that experience and success as a player, you were a first-round pick as well, does that help you when working with players now as a coach, that experience? Because it gives you an extra credibility. I feel like you've done it, you've succeeded, but at the same time, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's got to be a balance, right? Because just because you're the National Player of the Year and a first-round pick and played a bunch of pro ball, like that doesn't mean that you can speak to what a guy's going through, or that you have every solution to a problem they might be seeing. Because I think a lot of times guys that are supremely talented or have a lot of success, like there's certain elements of the game that maybe came easy to them. I definitely feel like in my career there was definitely skills and definitely physical upside and things that I did at a high level. But I think that the work that kind of had to get put in to make myself get to that level and rise to that level of whether it was getting accolades. I mean, the coolest part is, playing in Omaha and winning ACC titles with my teammates. Like that's the stuff when you get put in the Hall of Fame, like at Florida State, like that sticks with you. It was Sherman Johnson and Devin Travis and Sean Gilmartin. And it's all like, it was my roommates that I was around every day that are now doing great things in and out of baseball. I mean, that's when you go back and look at it. But I think it helps to a degree when you've played at a high level and you've stood in the batter's box against 97 and you've had the, ability to play with and around, some of the best players in the MLB at the pro level, not just in college. But I think the cool part has been studying the way the game was done. As a player, I didn't love getting traded around to, and playing for a bunch of different organizations, but it taught me big market, small market. It was St. Louis, then it was, Cleveland, then it was LA, then it was Seattle, then it was Minnesota, like all super successful organizations with people that are doing things at a high level. And so I think being a sponge was the thing that I always tried to do. And so I think that plus the playing experience, and now having had a lot of success in the college level is like, hey, Chandler Simpson came in here and won a batting title. Then he's now won a minor league batting title and stolen over 100 bases. And you can speak to the fact that he had the green light his whole year here and got thrown out 3 times in one game at Georgia Southern. Like I love telling that story because it's like, it's easy. The coach in you wants to sit there and go, the game slows down when you're outside the white lines, right? Like it's easy for a third base coach or got someone in the dugout, man, you shouldn't have gone on that. Or, but a guy like Chandler is super special. And if you don't let him play his game inside of your system, then you're going to hamstring him at some point later on in his career. When he goes on to pro ball, if he doesn't know when to run, how to run, and also just like the offensive development side of it. I think those are the fun things that when you can tell a player, hey, I went through something similar. I went through being a big prospect. I went through bad seasons. I went through injuries, all that stuff. I definitely think, to your point, like it's credibility, but I think it's it's like you've been through the grind, and I definitely, the thing I can relate to but can't relate to some of the superstar guys is I wasn't a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. And so I think that's the cool part about it is some of the guys I get to work with every day are way more physically gifted or whatever it is. But it's like, okay, if you can match that talent and the work ethic, and then also just like the selflessness of like, listen, you will get drafted and have a better pro career if you actually think about others just as much as you think about yourself. Like, you need to be selfish in your development, but if you can't see something beyond just you eating off your own plate, that's going to hurt you at some point. And so I think that's another part of, you go through the ups and downs of your own playing career and you try to remember how hard it was. And at times it feels like it was a long time ago I was playing. At times it feel like it was yesterday, but like, that's the cool part. You get to chirp guys. And I think the teams I was on at Florida State were so special to me because of the people, but the winning never stopped in the 4 years I was there. And so there's so many lessons that you learn from being in those dugouts. And then the pro side, where it's less about winning, it's more of the, all right, how do I navigate what's best for me while also being coachable? And then in your gut, if something doesn't sit right, like, I think that's something I try to bring with guys. It's a collaboration. It's not me telling them, you've got to do this with your load, your hands. It's okay. How do we feel like this is what we're trying to get you to do as a hitter? And then how do you feel about it? And then you get to listen to them and they'll voice their opinions, because we don't recruit anybody that didn't have a lot of success. Fair. So it's like, if they get there, it's like, you need to then say, hey, you had a lot of success. So you tell me what you used to think when you simplified the game. And so it's meeting them where they are. And then it's just, once again, it's the off the field, having their backs, that then ends up leading into growth down the road. Because if they don't feel like you have their back, then they're not going to play hard, or they're not going to buy into something that may be uncomfortable at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's awesome. Now it was just yesterday you were playing, okay? Because we're the same age. I don't want you to think it was forever ago. So let's, because I grew up a big UVA guy, and so those 2009 to 2012 years were with Danny Holtzen and all them, and that's why I remember you so well, because I know the UVA Florida State matchups were so big, especially in the ACC tournament. And it's just like, I feel like he was just playing yesterday. So let's go with that. We're
Danny
still
Holtzen,
young.
He was the GOAT. I always tell people, and I played with Stroman later on and love Stroh. I played with, like I said, I actually talked this morning to Sean Gilmartin, like, freshman pitcher of the year over Danny Holtzen, at least in one of the publications. Like, we lose the championship 2009. And it was, it was Phil Gosselin. It was, Steven Proscia. It was Frankie Valdez, Tyler Cannon. I mean, I'm leaving people out. Kyle Crockett came later in 2011, and Brandon Klein. And, I got a chance to play with some of those guys, but like, you have that respect for the 2009 and the 2011 championship games that got away. And then it was the 2010 championship game that we ended up winning against NC State. And then I always joke, we had an alumni event the other day, and Jake Davies from Tech was here, who turned into, Otani for a week in Greensboro, and Tech won the 2012 tournament. So, to your point, it's cool. I saw John Hicks when he was up there, working with the UVA staff, like Chris Taylor, who, how could I leave him out? Played with Chris, like, just stud. But like I said, it was cool, because you're talking about big leaguers on big leaguers. Yeah. But a lot of times it wasn't even going back to that whole like physical traits. It was more, those guys learned how to be gritty and they learned how to win. And there was something about not thinking you're better than your competition, but also thinking you're better, that like, when you show up, you expect to win, and you don't just roll it out there and think you're going to win. You do what it takes to win day in and day out.
Yeah. And it's so much fun to see guys develop. And we touched a little bit on your hitting philosophy previously, and I love watching you when I was down there this fall. You're really hands-on and engaged with your guys. Every inning, as they're getting ready to get up there, you were talking to them. Is that part of just who you are, just being hands-on and talking to them and just getting them prepared for their at-bats?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just like being relational by nature. Like, I love that. Even when I played, like, I'm at the end of the dugout, and I think like the positivity element is something that as a player was always like just juiced up all the time, like just completely energy guy, 0 for 5, 5 for 5. I just love to win. And so I think the part of it now as a coach, it's like, you have to give them the guardrails on how to be successful. But if you sit there and you try to drive for them all the time, or you tell them exactly what turns to take, like, you may get a better result in the moment. Like, honestly, tell a guy to bunt, tell a guy not to bunt, tell a guy to steal. Like, but if you don't let them play, and I learned that from my own playing experience, you get in front of 30,000 people, and you don't have the right fundamentals. Like, we were successful. We never won it all, but we played pretty well in the postseason, never lost a game in a regional. Like, when it's in a regional and things get really hard, it's really not usually time for a coach to step in and just change who they are. And so I think if you're, to your point, it's like, if you're super hands-on, not controlling mechanics, not controlling those things, but it's controlling mindset, it's controlling approach, it's controlling the things that they don't tell themselves, but they tell you, hey, when I was going good, I was thinking X thought. It's just placing that little bit on them before they go up to their bat, that they remind themselves that they're savage, right, when they go to the box. And so I think it is like, work wins for sure. And if you consistently work with your guys and give them a good game plan, and then you are in the trenches with them, right, and they feel like you're a part of the success and accountable for the failure, because we all had that, and we all fall victim to that, right? If player doesn't do well, oh, you didn't do what I told you to do. It's like, that's not true. Like, and if they did success, it's not just because they listened to you. So I think that the more communication you have with guys, like I said, of an encouraging nature and empowering nature, but it's got to be real. Like, you can't tell them something that they know is not true just because it's a positive thought, right? So I think that all those things play into it. And then the X's and O's of coaching, I mean, that's the beautiful, like, chess game that, it's football season right now. So everybody's watching really good play callers and defensive coordinators, and the chess match of, yeah, you could get a first down right now, but like, I might need something later in a game. But it's iron sharpening iron every week in our league. And even, when you go out in the Southeast and you're playing midweek games and you're playing the SEC every other weekend, there's a lot of really good coaches that have been successful, and you have to frame that as like, it's a great opportunity to learn from those guys, because that's who ultimately, between the ACC and the SEC, kind of the road to Omaha and regionals and all that stuff's going to be going right through here.
Yeah. And, one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about real quick before we started talking about the team and some of the players this year is we talked about you being a Florida State legend, and I'm sure it's not weird now, but was it weird at first being on the opposing sideline or, the opposing dugout when you faced Florida State?
I think initially, in its own way, right? We didn't play them until year 3, I think it was.
Okay, so that probably helped a little bit.
I think we were going down there when COVID happened, and that was, tough. It's not tough, but it's, so we went down to Tallahassee for the first time this past year, and it was emotional. I mean, the Martin family and 11, I mean, they did so much for me and my family. So went down to the, memorial service before the season started. And kind of, so beginning of the year before it started, I'm down there. And then it was our last regular season, very emotional roller coaster weekend for us, with a comeback win on game 3 of the series. It was almost like 24 hours delayed. One of the craziest games I've been a part of. And so, like, it kind of all hit me when that game finished, because it was like, it wasn't season on the line, but in a way it was like season was on the line, conference record. And then all the emotions of being back down there, playing there. My family was there. Kids get to see that. And so I think the animals at Florida State have always got, spot in my heart, and getting chirped in a good way and hat tipped, leaving there by them, things you remember. And I think that's where, as you go on, you have to be yourself, and you have to realize, like, the loyalty you had to a place like that, and still love that place and want those guys to be super successful. And then in 2021 and then 2022, when you get a chance to win a baseball game, just like you get taught to do, you got to win a baseball game. And so that's the easy part is, when the game's going on, you got to win. You got to do everything you can. So I think that's the cool part about it.
Yeah, and we have been robbed of a Georgia Tech Florida State matchup this year, because I was very excited because the Lodi Bowl would have happened. The two shortstops would have gone head to head, and that was something I was excited about. I was waiting for it to drop because I was like, I'm going to Atlanta if that's the series. Unfortunately, it's not happening, but I do want to talk about Kyle Lodis. That's a big guy you got in the transfer window. We got to talk to him, and he was a pretty hot commodity in the transfer portal, and he stressed that Georgia Tech was the right fit because it was close to home, but he also stressed that your ability as the hitting coach was a factor. But what's it like having Kyle Lodis in there and bringing that kind of talent in the transfer portal?
Yeah, I mean, love Kyle. Like from day one, it was an easy like recruitment because you just hit it off with the dude and you feel like you have some similarities. And that's the thing about him. Like the first word for me is just like energy. Like I know I can relate, like high energy. Like he is off the walls every day in the best way. Like it's, something that you want out of a player on your team. If he ends up leading off for us, he'll be a great spark plug if that's what he does. If he's hitting in the 3-hole or 4-hole or whatever it is, I mean, he'll embrace it. I think he's versatile. He can run. He can play defense. His hands are incredible. He has a great arm. He can hit for power. He can hit for average. It's exciting when you get to work with those guys. It is the Chandler Simpsons. It's the Tim Bordens. It's the Justin Henry Malloys. It's some of these transfers that have gone on to have unbelievable seasons, great careers. Angelo Despina's and they go on and on and on, but like guys that you wish you had for more time. Right. And so you try to do the best you can with, a shorter window with them. And stay in touch with all those guys I mentioned to this day. But it's like, he's another one on that lineage of guys that come in here and in a short amount of time, make a really big impact. Matthew Ellis last year comes to mind, Jack Rubenstein the year before, I'm sure I'm leaving people out, but it's like those are awesome. Like you take those guys for a year and you're super thankful that you got a chance. And then you hope that you help their trajectory in their careers. Like Jahen was talking about, the move he made and changed his life. Now he's playing in the big leagues in a postseason. And, to think that the experience here played a part in that is what keeps you working and constantly investing in the current guys you have, and then the recruits that are coming in the future.
Yeah, as a fan, it kills me. You get to know these transfers that come in, especially some of the graduate transfers who may not necessarily have. They're good. They're really good college players, but they may not have that pro pedigree because the age thing is a bit in my opinion, a little bit overvalued. Excuse me. When you've got some good hitters and you only get 1 year of them, and then sometimes with the draft eligible sophomores, that kills me too because I'm like, wait, what? We only get 2 years of them, but we talked about Kyle. I really love his approach. Him and Drew didn't have the best game against Jacksonville State when I was there, but one thing I noticed is Kyle's plate awareness is just incredible, and to a point to where it can sometimes get him into trouble. Even he admitted that himself, is that sometimes he knows the strike zone better, but what matters is what the ump calls. Is he working to be a little bit more aggressive, or I know it sounds like you let them kind of have the freedom to kind of figure out how they want to go, but is he working to be a little bit more aggressive, or is that just something that comes with being that patient of a hitter?
Yeah, I think it's a balance, right? Like to have the tool in your tool belt, which is elite zone discipline, like Christian Campbell comes to mind, and there's no mystery of why he's having the success he's having. If you can't control the zone, which means decision-making, and it means can you actually cover the pitches and not swing and miss and make contact with high impact in the zone, you don't really have a chance to keep moving up and making a living in baseball. And so you can mask those things, right, early on through approach, through swing changes, whatever. I think with Lodis, he can discern the strike zone really well. And I think that I have no issues with he's going to walk at a high clip. His strikeout numbers are going to be very low. But I think he's learning more as the fall went on too. Like there's a guy in scoring position, your swing percentage is going to go up in the zone, right? Not out of the zone, but just in the zone. If you have a chance, guy in third, less than 2 outs to put a ball in play and we're up by 1 run versus down by 5 runs, like that's kind of when I let guys shape their approach, but let them teach them, but then let them go. And so I think with Lodis, like if you said that, a guy's going to be on base over 400 clip and doing that potentially in front of Drew Burris, like rinse and repeat, right? Like that's a dangerous combination, especially when he can steal. And, we hired Josh Schulman from Wofford, and he's been an unreal addition to us on just every which way. But base running is going to be a bigger area of emphasis for us. And so if Lodi's is stealing bags at a high level and Burris is stealing bags and making smart decisions on the base paths, it just gives us another element to the offense that you have to have as many tools as you can.
Yeah, and one of the things I loved, you talked about him possibly hitting in front of Drew. Kyle and Drew look like they've been friends forever. Even though Kyle's a transfer, it just looks like the team chemistry is going really well there. But let's talk a little bit about Drew and how he's looking. I mean, he came in with high expectations, and he exceeded those expectations somehow. And yet we talked a little bit before the pregame, he's able to maintain that line between confidence and the arrogance while also staying humble. And it's just really fun to watch him play. And is that somebody you clicked with right away when you started recruiting him? And was it he an easy sell for Georgia Tech?
Yeah, I would say yes, we clicked. I think it was a long-term recruitment. It was a long-term, relationship kind of got developed with him and his whole family. Easy sell, we knew we wanted him. I think he had a chance to go anywhere and everywhere and go be a dude right away. I'm super grateful that, he decided to come here. Super grateful he decided to turn down a lot of money out of high school. I guess in today's era too, like, I think that he's just about the right stuff. He's a loyal dude that wants to win, and that's what appeals to him. And that's what I think his and I's relationship flourished at an early level. Cause he writes his goals down. And to your point about the playing credibility, it was a lot of the things that I'd done, and he had done his own research. Like, well, you did this and I want to do that. And I'm like, well, I guarantee you, buddy, you can do all that and a lot more. And so it's been cool to see him flourish more as a leader this year. Last year, it was like well documented, but like he didn't hit a home run until the last weekend before the season started. And so it's like he was a stud from day one, but like he was playing great, but it wasn't like it was his team from day one, even though it probably was. But then all of a sudden it was like, bam, bam, bam. Here's a moment. Here's a moment. Here's a moment. And then, that's what he wanted to do, but he didn't like push his way into that. He just let the play go and let his work ethic show it. And so then, now, he's done a really good job of like the expectations are unreal high, and he has those for himself. But I think there's that balance too that you got to find of like, you can't go and expect to take 4 swings and hit 4 home runs again this year. Like that may be a once in a lifetime thing. But I would never put it past him to not be a part of special moments from the first time he steps in the box. I mean, that's, it's been a long time, a lot of places that going into a season, you have a player of his caliber with multiple seasons left that can keep people in the stadium every single time he walks to the plate. I mean, that's what MLB teams dream on. It's the jersey sales, and it's the Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire as an 8-year-old or whatever, like turning on the television, like on the local news channel. I mean, that's what Drew can have in the city of Atlanta. That's what he can have across the country for college baseball, which has never been in a better place. And there's never been a better face in my mind for the sport at the NCAA level than Drew Burris in college baseball.
Yeah. One of the things that drives me nuts right now, and he and I talked about it a little bit, is, to me, he should be looking at 2026 drafts. He should be in that top 5, but there's a lot of stress on his size, and it seems like that's kind of helped him as well because it seems like he plays with a chip on his shoulder. But it drives me nuts, the size issue there, because to me, it doesn't matter. Like, I think back to somebody like Dustin Pedroia, who also had a size, but when he hit the ball and he hit it hard, you could tell he had to put his whole body into it. Whereas Drew looks like it's just easy. It doesn't look like his size is a factor, and yet it keeps being brought up. Is that kind of a frustrating thing, or is that not anything you guys ever talk about?
Yeah, I think it doesn't like come straight out in conversations or whatever. But like the one thing that I think has been consistent is like, he'll get the last say. Like, I think that's like the fun, like Drew will get the last say, and not many people get to say that about their careers. And someone will take him very early in the draft in 2026 and will immediately sell jerseys, and they'll immediately, up their social media followings, and they'll immediately do the things that Paul Skeens was doing at the MLB level. It's not hyperbole to say that. I think Drew can impact a franchise, and the people that value that will be rewarded for their value of him. I think.
That's a good way to look at it.
I think that's been the cool part is a lot of times you can play up that, or you can play up, being an underdog or whatever. Drew just plays, and he lets his play do the talking. And that's why I kind of always say, like, he's going to have the last say in how it all shakes out. And somebody's going to be super excited about making him a part of their organization because it's going to become a championship organization.
Yeah, it was so fun to talk to him because he's aware of those, and he had no problem bringing it up, and he's just a lot of fun to talk to. Let's move on. You get John Giesler back for another year. What kind of excitement does that bring you with getting some of that leadership with it? You've got a really young team, so it's probably really nice to have someone like Goose back.
Yeah, no, he's the man. I mean, just personally, relationship wise, like, love the dude. I think we called him MV Geese was the nickname he got because for the 6th straight fall, the Fall World Series team he was on won, which is like, how does that happen? Like, there has to be an X factor element. He is the ultimate leader and the most humble, hardworking. You want to talk about like making himself a good player in our system. We've had a lot of good offenses, and for him to have become that is a full testament to him and only him. Like the perseverance, the grit of staying with something because he believed in what we were doing here. He's huge. He's once again, like, you look at Burris and for him to do what he does, or you look at Lodi's for him to, like, so much of it on the everyday basis comes back to what John Giesler does for us from an identity standpoint, that he is Georgia Tech baseball, and he has a PhD in the Georgia Tech hitting philosophy and all the, it's like he can sit there during a hitters meeting and we talk schematically about something we're going to do with an approach. And then he can maybe even lean over to a freshman and say, hey, you remember what that saying means, right? That means this part of the zone and this time, and then this timing for that. Like, it's invaluable. I mean, it is. It's like, if you want to make him the system quarterback that can distribute the ball to like all our weapons we have, that's what he does. And then we were looking at some stuff the other day on defensive metrics, and our pitching coach Matt Taylor and director pitching Jason Richmond and Trey Younger, who's been helping us out this year, is there. And we're all talking about, and Giesler, like, defensively, his like metrics were like out of this world, one of the best defenders. And it's like, even us, we're like, I don't know about, but it's like, it is true. Like, he makes every play and he knows where to play. And like his outs above average and some of those things like were through the roof. And so it's, once again, no one ever thought 3 years ago, 4 years, that John Giesler would be a starting third baseman, on a really good ACC team. It's probably keyhole to first. He caught, he tried catching, and he could do it. He could go back there and be a backup catcher. And so, those are the guys you talk about. Like, once again, you have to talk about Burris, like a generational talent and person, but you talk about Giesler that, if I'm fortunate enough to be a coach 10 years from now, in whatever capacity, like, you're going to tell guys about the John Gieslers. They don't have to hear as many stories about the Drew Burris's, right? Because he's going to be just like a Charlie Blackmon or a Buster Posey or whatever. He's going to be the face of something. John Giesler is the guy that can give a lot of hope to the middle or bottom of your roster, that they can become a top of the roster guy with the right work ethic.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I knew he missed a chunk of time last year with an injury, but he still put up numbers that were for a full season's worth of things, because I was doing the numbers for it, and I was like, oh, could have sworn he missed a bunch of time, but he when he got hot, he got hot. And I'm also very thankful I got to use the meme with him putting his face over a goose again. So that'll be fun. But Kent Schmidt, who you guys got, another transfer. He hit 2 home runs for Georgia Southern all of last year. He was a really good hitter, but not much power. He made some loud noise in that Jacksonville State scrimmage. He hit 2 home runs alone in that game. Are you excited about that power surge? Was that kind of an anomaly, or is that something that he's going to be able to do and bring to the table?
Yeah, no, I mean, the cool part about Kent, right? High school teammates with Carson Kearse, already like has that DNA from being like a Pope High School player, and then goes to Georgia Southern with a really good tradition of playing guys and developing guys. And so I think he went down there and played really well. And then I think from the recruiting pitch, like when we were recruiting him to come here, I think he had a good understanding of what we do, but it was like, what would you do with me if I came to Tech? And we went through and clicked through True Media and looked at a couple things. And I said, man, I know this stuff's not easy, but it is simple. Like if you simply do these things, which once again are not easy, then we think your success is imminent, right, for us. And so he had 5 or 6 somewhere home runs this fall. I think the bigger part is, once again, though, we express that to him. He commits here. He then kind of on his own, and then from day one being here, like has been like overly open and coachable in a good way. Like, hey, I want to do this. How do I do this? And we've had to say, hey, like baby steps. And so like, he's got a great smile. Like when things go good, he juices a ball pull side that he had. Oh man, even in BP, like you can tell that look on his face, like when something's clicking. And I think he just had a high appetite for putting a plan in front of him, challenging him in our everyday training. And then, super proud of him. But like the best part about him is he's a hitter. He's not a slug guy. He will slug for us, but he uses the backside of the field. He crushes left-handed pitching. He grinds at bats. He does what's asked of him. And so, super fortunate, because you mentioned culture, and everybody's going to tell you they have a great culture in December, right? But I do think that these guys are young. At times they're very inexperienced, but they do carry themselves not like they're new and young. And they also care about each other a lot, which, as much as you want to say as a coach, you can preach, like some of that stuff just emerges from having the right people around and the right dynamics at play. And so I think Kent has stepped in and feels like he's been here. He's like, I told him that something like you're the most experienced first year player in the program that we've had here in a long time.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see. Again, I'm really glad I got to get down there, because it's really exciting to see that lineup kind of coming together. And, you got a bunch of guys who are candidates for breakouts. I'm actually working on an article with Prospects Live trying to identify breakout candidates, and I had to add in some different qualifications to try and whittle that list down. But Vaughn Lackey, I think, seems like he's set for a breakout offensive year. Obviously, he was a fantastic defensive catcher last year. Carson Kearse, who had an outstanding summer, I think he's going to have a really solid year. And then I think one of the guys that I was going to have for my article is Tyler Nesis, somebody who didn't have a ton of play last year, who could make a big significant step forward this year as a sophomore. What have those 3 guys shown you, and is there a guy I'm missing who might be a breakout candidate?
Yeah, I think we have probably 5 or 6 more that you could add to the list that are freshmen, that it's, highly ranked recruiting class, whatever that means. But it's like, it was a really good fit for what we needed, because we hit on a lot of guys in 23 through the middle of the field, right? So you go Kearse, Lackey, Burris in that class specifically. Then you run into a guy like Nisus that's been here. Kearse, like they've been here, and Tyler's definitely had a great fall. Another just like super hard worker, big body, slugs, man, hits the ball so hard, left-handed, which we made it a priority to try to get more left-handed. Checks a lot of boxes. He's been defensively versatile for us. Lackey is as special as special gets. I mean, I think, you look at the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, pitching, and how the best teams play complementary baseball. The catcher is probably the most important piece of that puzzle, right? Of managing a pitching staff, being in the lineup, not being too focused on their hitting. It's kind of like the shortstop position, but the catcher gets to receive the ball every time the pitcher throws it. And so Vaughn, metrically outstanding last year. Umpires loved him and got fooled by him. And it's like he was throwing guys out at a crazy high clip. I mean, the UVA series comes to mind, makes a couple plays that either gets us out of innings or gets us in a better, base out state. Vaughn can change the game. And I think we absolutely, see a lot coming from him next year. I mentioned Kirsch earlier about Schmidt playing together, just being a winner. He's in that core. You get a guy like Parker Brocious back again with a really good Cape season he had. And then, like I said, like you don't even want to list the freshmen because there's too many of them to list. But you go down the list of, we've got guys up and down that are going to play. They're going to make starts. They're going to play often. We love the way that they're all progressing. But it's like you have other guys too, like a Drew Rogers that turns down money. Alex Hernandez he's a two-way that has a chance to be high ceiling. Connor Schaus, same thing as a two-way. Josh Evans comes in, throwing at the draft combine up to 93 from the left sides, had a good fall. Caleb Daniel, you go up and down, just we feel really good about this class and the things they can do for us. And so I think it's going to be good stress. Nathan Waugh transfers in from Cornell and is just a physical monster and has good play discipline. So it's like you've seen those Ivy League guys come in and have success in the ACC, SEC. So I think it's like, man, how do you consistently look at that and see how it's going to impact you? We feel like we have a lot of pieces. And the good part about a lot of those guys is like they're super athletic. And so it's like, okay, if they can play, a lot of those freshmen I just mentioned can play multiple positions. So you're going to have injuries. You're going to have guys go through lulls and ups and downs, and Curse and then Bichetti last year, like they ended up, handing off, then Giesler goes down and guys slide over. I mean, it never stops. You can't have enough depth in our league. And so we feel like a lot of guys are going to get a lot of chances to play, and we're looking forward to seeing what they can do with it.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time, and pitching wise looked really good. I know that's Matt Taylor's area, but I think Tate McKee is going to have a huge year. He's somebody who got a lot of valuable experience, and then Carson Ballard. So, and these freshmen they brought in, I was having a blast watching them just throw strike after strike after strike, which I think is something that Georgia Tech has had struggles with sometimes in the past. So it's really exciting stuff this year. Is there a series that you're looking most forward to playing this year or being part of? I know our league is such a grind, so it's hard to narrow down, but is there any particular, I don't want to say looking forward to, but enticing matchup?
It's one of those things you look at it and then you look at the 26 schedule making and you look at it that sometimes like, it so well that you don't, as the calendar turns, I think you really start to like, to use like the football analogy, you kind of chunk up, okay, this middle third of our schedule, or like you kind of try to break it up, whether that's as a staff or that's to the players. Like, don't worry about conference season. Let's say we got the 3 series to open up or whatever it is, right? Focus on, obviously it's the cliches, it's the one game, but like you can actually look at it and say, okay, if we're down the stretch and like last year you're playing against Duke, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech, and then there was one more, Virginia. Those were like our last 6 series, like 18 games against teams that were, 3 of them went to Omaha. We started with NC State. But like you go through it and you go, man, like if we have to go through another stretch, we're going on the road. We're going to be battle tested. I think that was like our young core grew up through those challenges and those series. And so I think that was the fun part to see them. And then just to hit back on, Matt on the pitching side and Jason as the director, like those guys have put in a ton of work and give them a lot of credit. We've all put a lot of trust in them and their expertise, and the players have kind of rallied behind that. And there was things that the performance was definitely better. I mean, it was a lot better. I think the process behind it was immeasurably better. Like when you look at performance stats and then you peel back a layer on like process data, like things you can control as an offense or a defense or base running or whatever, they did an outstanding job of getting better. And then now you mentioned those young arms that have come in. It's if you have a mile an hour more velocity as a player, as a staff, just like exit velocity, performance, if you stay the same, is going to get better. And so if like you can consistently chip away at it, and then I think on the pitching side, it's going to be our strength is going to have to be, and it will be our depth. And so guys, you'd love to have what some schools have and 2 top 10 picks or, 5 guys drafted in the first 5 rounds on the mound. We could have that, but I think what we could also have is a balance of no one has to shoulder the load. And if you can consistently chip away and play, once again, like complementary baseball with our offense and base running and defense, like if we can do that, I think we're going to be exactly where we want to be come June.
Yeah, and it felt like with your success last year, that's kind of what happened once you guys moved Cam Jones into that Saturday role. It felt like the pitching kind of really came together and was able to do what they needed to do to help the offense. But I've taken up enough of your time. I could keep talking to you for a while, but I'm gonna let you go. Do you have any final thoughts you want to talk about before I wrap this up?
No, I just, it's fun to jump on. A lot of great coaches in our league, a lot of good information, being put out with these. I think, we're excited to kind of just, once again, you want to get to a place where everybody wants to go in Omaha. You want to win ACC titles, and you want the expectations and the standards of your program to keep lining up. So we feel good about our team, and but we know that it's a grind in this league. And so, definitely once again, appreciate y'all's coverage, and, we'll be, the Yellow Jackets hopefully are getting your and Micah's love, and we'll be ready to go here in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. And I think about a month ago, I think I tweeted out, I believe that your team is going to be in Omaha either this year or next year. Before Drew Burris leaves. I truly believe that. Just everything seems to be coming together, and it's just a matter of getting hot at the right time, and I'm excited to see that potentially happen. So that's going to wrap us up here. We will be back with another episode next week, but until then, go Yellow Jackets.